Welcome one and welcome all. It is Tuesday, November 28th, 2023. It is 8:03 p.m. Central Standard Time, and apparently that is too late for some of our most loyal listeners and viewers. It is time for this week's Blogging the Boys Roundtable. You can watch us live on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel or the Blogging the Boys Twitch channel. You can always catch the rewatch on these particular platforms at your own convenience, or you can listen to the show at your own convenience on the Blogging the Boys podcast network. If you don't want to see our faces, we do take offense if that is the case. Make sure to subscribe to the Blogging the Boys podcast network wherever you get your podcasts. If you see, listen, hear, watch, or read any Blogging the Boys content anywhere in this or any other galaxy, you are familiar with the work of myself. I am RJ Ochoa, and going in clockwise order, he was first here tonight, Tony Catalina. Tony, you look like it is a frigid 31 degrees outside right now.
You're not far off. It's probably a give or take a degree or two there, but not far.
How's your pellet heater thing working out?
I mean, that's life for me. A pellet stove has been a lifesaver.
All right. I have a pellet grill, and I was encouraged to get one by our second panelist here tonight. It is David Howman. I don't know if the turkey leg that Dak Prescott is eating behind you was smoked on a pellet grill, but either way, what do you think of your pellet grill? What do you think of Dak's turkey leg? And what do you think of this evening?
Yeah, well, I mean, I love my pellet grill. It absolutely gets me through the week, through the month, and made a lot of good food on there. Love the turkey leg that Dak pulled out of the red kettle. I especially appreciate the fact that it was wrapped. You couldn't tell that at first. I thought he just somebody stuck it down there at the bottom. And I was like, that's got to be disgusting. So I was happy to find out later they did bag it up and wrap it appropriately.
Yeah, it was well done. You're right. I think at first it looked kind of concerning. I think we were all kind of worried, has this been there the entire game? You know what I mean? That would be kind of gross. I thought maybe it was like a plastic leg and he just committed to the bit. But either way, good to know that everything was done in a sanitary and healthy kind of standpoint. Danny Phantom, it is the third week in a row that all four of us are here together. You have talked about, was it macaroni salad? And not brought any. Did you have any though on Thanksgiving Day?
I had quite a bit of macaroni salad. I will say this, and I will say I agree with Howman about I thought that was disgusting when I first saw it too, but I haven't seen something that disgusting since last week's roundtable when those guys wolfed down their food. So
only one of us wolfed it down. Tony he ate one in 20 minutes.
Tony, there was some chatter on the internet about your failure last week.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to say for yourself 1 week post not deviled egg completion?
Well, like you said, I had a dozen. So by the time you accepted the challenge,
that was up to you. This
there were
completely
6 of them left.
Your decision.
I already had a half dozen before he was like, all right, go ahead and race. I'm like, there's no way I can eat more than one more of these right now.
So as we address the chat, because we were here tardy, and I'll let everybody know, kind of pull back the curtain, my computer freaked out, and it's a tight week because the Cowboys play on Thursday Night Football this week, so it's always weird for us because all of our content gets kind of shifted around. Wednesday, we will be launching this week's episode of the NFC East mixtape on our YouTube channel, as well as this week's Madden simulation. So I'm actually running it behind everyone. So we'll see how Madden has the Cowboys doing this particular week. But the chat was all excited because we were late. And Chris Halling is here. And Kevin called him out and said, Chris, hiding in the chat, did they not let you play today? Chris, you have an open invitation. You know that. Chris said, I didn't think I would be available tonight, but last second plan switch things up. I will be spectating tonight, coming back for the throne soon. Tony, Chris likes to talk about how he's going to beat you at these things. But Chris, I love you. It doesn't feel like that ends up winding to be the case.
I let you tell it. I'm glad you said that, not me.
There's a lot of here we go happening here. Howman, is the here we go thing cool? I feel like I haven't seen enough t-shirts or merchandise. I would feel like the Cowboys themselves would have had something with that at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think they need to bring Ben DiNucci back into the fold just to get that kind of apparel going. But I like it. I think it's funny. I've seen some really good jokes out there on Twitter with the here we go. So it's been a fun little catchphrase to catch on here.
Yeah, Danny, I mean, Jerry Jones had the Zeke Who thing ready, after they signed the extension. Again, I'm just kind of surprised that, they don't have a single piece of merchandise available around this.
Yeah, it makes no sense. I mean, I saw it was one of their little things they did to have everybody kind of do it through on Thanksgiving. And I thought that was pretty fun. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things that if you're a Cowboys fan, you absolutely love it. I'm sure everybody else is annoyed with it, but I don't care. So
Okay, well, so as we get started here tonight, we have a lot to get to, including some here we go discussion about Dak Prescott. But I do have a bit of a surprise for everybody. I promise I planned this ahead of time, even though I was late, so it's not like me making it up to y'all. Which one of you three plays the most video games? I'm gonna guess Tony. Is that fair to say?
I really don't know. I just do my hand up because I play.
I can tell you who plays the least.
Okay, Tony, are you like a Call of Duty player? Is that like a cup of tea of yours?
No, I honestly, I pretty much stick to like a lot of sports games. I mean, I'm pretty vanilla, but that's kind of my speed.
I'm with you. I'm not great at these games, so I don't really dabble myself. But as I understand, the audience can correct me if I'm wrong. Every now and then, there will be certain weekends with these kinds of games that are double points, where obviously everything you do is worth double. It is a double points night here on the Blogging the Boys Roundtable. Everything you do is worth double. That means everything that the chat offers you is worth double. So, chat, we don't need you to do the double. I will handle the math on my end. If you want to award 5 points, there's no reason that you have to award 10. I will hand out the 10. So be normal, be straight up with how you want to hand out the points to these contenders here tonight. Chris Holling, you managed to miss double points night. These things come around once in a blue moon. Howman, do you feel like this is an advantage or a disadvantage for your particular game?
I don't know if it's an advantage. I just think maybe we might be breaking the record for most points for a champion. So that's exciting.
That's true. I don't know what the record is. I think it's in the like 190s. So if any of you hits 200, we'll see how things go.
Well, to be fair, sometimes you give up 50 points for eating something. So, I mean,
you know what, Danny Phantom? I'm going to give you 5 points, which is worth 10, which means now you have 16 points. The total as it stands right now, Tony 14, Howman 20, Danny 16. As you see, things are going to climb really fast around here on double points night. I don't see anybody handing out points since I have noted that. Ooh, Nicholas Frank with a great question. Is it double minus points too? You know what, Nicholas? Why the hell not? I mean, if it's double, it's double. So if you deduct 5 points, I will take away 10 from each particular roundtabler. That's only fair, right, Tony?
It is. I mean, that's, let's play the game.
Kevin notes, by the way, just to know if you guys don't break the record, it is bad tonight. Some people would offer Danny Phantom that is bad no matter what, because Shaquille Leonard visited the Dallas Cowboys on Tuesday afternoon, did not sign with them, left without a contract, and is now headed to the city of brotherly love to visit with the Eagles. So, of course, DEFCON 1 on the Twitter streets. The Cowboys suck. They can't close. Of course, he'd rather play for the Eagles. Howie Roseman is a genius. Howie Roseman is the GOAT. How are you feeling about this?
I mean, I'm feeling the same. I mean, this is just business as usual for the Cowboys. I mean, I don't know that if any of us had any huge expectations as far as, this signing. And I think a lot of us have a lot of apprehensions about it because we really don't know what type of player that, Shaq Leonard is. I do think Philly is just a better fit for him. I mean, they have a stronger need, especially with the recent hamstring injury to Zach Cunningham. And, he can go in there and he's going to play. Where I'm not sure where he fits in exactly with the Cowboys, because we got the young guys that they're playing well. And so I just think it just makes more sense for him to go to Philly. I just don't think the Cowboys' interest is going to be as much as some of the Cowboys fans' interest is. And when you look at all that, I think you put all that together, and I just feel like it was never going to happen. If it doesn't, and it just looks more like he'll end up signing for the Eagles. I will say this too. In the biggest thing is the thing that the reason I would want him is because, I mean, I'm perfectly happy with our young guys, but I am worried that we just don't have anything after that. Like Rashaan Evans has been fine, but if you look at like teams like the top running teams, the ones that run the ball the most, you got Atlanta, which we could end up seeing in the postseason, and Philly's right behind them, and the McCaffrey and the Niners, and you got a lot of teams that could really be strong in the running game. And then if we lose one of those guys, Damone Clark goes down, for example, and then we have to rely on our smaller guys. That part concerns me. I wish that the Cowboys did have a little more depth, but do I care really one way or another with Shaq Leonard? No.
Chris notes, by the way, in the chat that the Eagles did open up a roster spot today, which Howman would suggest that it is time for Howie Roseman to make his move. Kevin took away 5 points, which is 10 points from Danny Phantom tonight, saying Dallas is paper thin at linebacker. We have as strong of a need as anyone in the league. Do you agree with this, David Howman?
I have to disagree at the risk of also losing 10 points. But I mean, Marquise Bell has played phenomenally. He has been really, really good. And also Damone Clark, for that matter, has been also really good. You've also got Rashaan Evans, who they've been gradually kind of working in on the defense a little bit. And he's also a former first-round pick when he and Shaq Leonard were in the same draft. Teams all had him ranked above Leonard. They drafted him above Leonard. And now one of them's on the Cowboys, one of them's a free agent. And the Colts didn't just cut Leonard out of nowhere. I mean, there was a reason. His play has declined. He hasn't had the health. These guys are available for a reason at this point. It's not like he's coming in and is going to be that first team All-Pro that he was earlier in his career in Indianapolis. And I tweeted this out earlier today is the Cowboys have two defenders on their team, Stephon Gilmore and Malik Hooker, who played with him in Indianapolis. They obviously know him well. Dan Quinn is really close with Colts defensive coordinator Gus Bradley. I'm sure that he's talked with Gus Bradley to get kind of inside information on him. Also, John Park, the head of their analytics department now this year, he came over from the Colts too. He was there when they drafted Shaq Leonard. He was there all the way up until this season. So just in terms of like having inside info in addition to the actual scouting they've done, I'm pretty sure that the Cowboys know exactly what they were getting into ahead of this meeting. And then once they actually met with him, that probably just kind of confirmed what they already thought they knew going into it. The fact that they let him walk out without a contract tells me that they didn't feel like they were necessarily desperate enough to add him for what they thought he might contribute. The Eagles, on the other hand, are very desperate because they completely botched their linebacker situation in the offseason. They let both their starters go. Nakobe Dean hasn't lived up to the pre-draft hype. Even Zach Cunningham, who they brought in later, has not played well. They've struggled with pass coverage in their linebacker unit, and that's always been the weaker point for Leonard. He's more of a run stopper. So if the Eagles go out and get him, it's one, because they're kind of desperate for help there. And two, I don't really think he's going to be that good of a fit for them. But, Howie Roseman is definitely the kind of GM where he's going to throw everything at the wall, see what sticks. More often than not, it does. But I'm not really too concerned about if they do get him.
The Nakobe Dean thing is an example of during the draft. Danny, I know you like to beat this drum. When the Eagles land somebody that feels like a big name or went to Georgia or whatever, doesn't always work out. It often does, but it isn't always the case. Rudy says in the chat, would something have kept him in Dallas? And then Brian, everybody follow Brian on TikTok at Top Cowboys, says Leonard would probably be our linebacker 2 or 3. He would be linebacker 1 in Philly. That's kind of what this might wind up being about, Tony, is that the Cowboys don't have as pressing of a need. Philly might be more desperate. They might offer him more playing time and more money. And it's, in that sense, a pretty easy decision for Leonard to make.
Yeah, from my understanding, though, the situation is pretty clear in the sense that, like, the Colts are on the hook for a lot of the money. So the money, and I think Jerry even alluded to the fact that it's not really a huge factor in this situation. It's really going to be about fit and where he wants to be and who can be the best salesman. I think Jerry Jones, has a clear advantage there when it comes to really anybody in the league. But what I think is not the Cowboys' fault and why this played out the way it did is I think Shaq Leonard had a preconceived notion that he was going to go ahead and take his time, and he had talked about going to see multiple places and kind of given the due diligence. So I don't think that there's really anything Dallas could have did today to keep him within the building. I think what has been reported by the national people is there's no plans for him to play this weekend. So I think he was going to take the weekend, figure out where he wants to be, and make a decision sometime this weekend. With that being said, the Cowboys got the first crack at it, which I think holds some type of weight, right? If you look at it and say this, this may speak to something, it may speak to nothing, but, he got him in the room first. They could always say, hey, we're the first team to really show some interest in you. I'm sure Philly will sell him, a pipe dream. They're 10-1, and there's different things that, pluses and minuses when you look at both teams. But I actually don't even really necessarily believe that he would get more opportunity in Philly, because when Zach Cunningham comes back from whatever that injury looks like, what is the role for a Leonard look like, right? Like right now, the Cowboys are paper thin in linebacker. We have a safety who's been playing out of his mind coming down to play linebacker. I think there is opportunity for to come in and make an impact. It just comes down to where does he want to be and what does he value.
I think that's really well said by all of you. I tweeted this out earlier myself. We always mention things that we tweet out because that's just the world that we live in. I know this isn't popular to say, but the Cowboys have kind of earned the benefit of the doubt from me, and I would imagine at least the three of you on things like this. Their patience can often be very frustrating, but They are generally right on these things. Last year, they dabbled very publicly in the Odell Beckham Jr. waters, and they were proven to be right. Not that Odell sucks or anything this season for the Ravens, but he was not ready when they were having those conversations. And that was the big idea, the big premise behind what was happening at the time. And they weren't the only team to pass on Odell a year ago. The Giants did. The Bills did. Every team who was, quote unquote, desperate the way the Cowboys are for a linebacker right now decided to pass on Odell. He came back, obviously. I do think this is something for us to kind of bookmark, though. The same way that Dallas traded for Brandon Cooks in the following offseason after a year ago, they are obviously going to be in need, at the linebacker spot. I don't think that's breaking news, obviously, but something to just kind of monitor moving forward. You all did really well here in terms of points. It is a double point night. So as we currently stand, Tony with the lead with 48 points, Howman 44. Danny, sometimes the crowd just takes a while to get warmed up in the generosity department, and you went first, and so that's why you're sitting at 30 right now.
Yeah, I just want to add one more thing to this before we move away from it.
Cast the net.
Not that I'm trying for more points here, but I do want to mention a couple things too. Is the other side of this too is like if you're thinking about from the Leonard side of it, is he's going to be playing for a contract next year, and he wants to go to a place where there's going to be a lot of visibility. He's going to make decisions based on like who's going to be playing the more postseason games, where is he going to be able to shine more? Like, I don't really think that's going to be Dallas in the sense of he's going to come in and jump these other guys, where I think there is that opportunity in Philly. And of course, Howman made great points about all the connections he has with the Cowboys. But, Nick Sirianni was the coach in with the Colts when he was there. So, I mean, there's some good.
He left Frank Reich. Let us all know that.
So I just feel like it just seems like it's obvious that it's going to be Philadelphia. And I just think that it makes sense from both sides, in my opinion.
I also think it's obvious that not only it's going to be Philadelphia, but that people are going to freak out. Like it is going to be treated like the most, Howie Roseman thing of all time. Like, I mean, I'm already kind of pre-annoyed at that.
Like they did with Robert Quinn last year.
Quinn, and I mentioned this on the mixtape that I talked about. The Ndamukong Suh and Linval Joseph signings got a lot of pop last year. Not that they were terrible for the Eagles, but they didn't like revolutionize it. They didn't win the Super Bowl, obviously. So just context all over the place. Danny, I don't know if you have
I mean, Quinn was absolutely invisible, to be honest. I mean, that was just nothing. That was a nothingness sign for them. I mean, everybody did go crazy.
It was a trade. They didn't sign him. They traded for him.
Oh, trade, whatever. But it absolutely gave them nothing. I mean,
sorry. I thought Howman raised his hand.
He's holding his hand up to like.
I know you raised. You're either gonna
I thought Danny was still making
them for distracting all of us.
I just wanted to add, since you brought up, Sirianni's love for Frank Reich, it's a shame the Eagles don't play the Panthers this year so that he has a chance to like rip his shirt off and like twirl it around his head after they beat him. Like, this is for Frank Reich.
Yeah, that remains one of the more interesting things of all time to happen. Okay, well, that's our Shaquille Leonard discussion. That was something that happened on Tuesday. Something else that happened on Tuesday. And I think I speak for all of us in saying we have a universal football hatred for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, on a humanitarian level, Aaron Rodgers has set himself behind the eight ball over the course of the last few years. So a lot of people have kind of joined us on this hill, but we kind of had to walk that back a little bit on Tuesday because our guy, Aaron Rodgers, who none of us have ever said anything disparaging about, went on the Pat McAfee show and defended Dak Prescott. Tony, I'm going to play this clip when you say that you are ready to go.
Let's do it.
Tom had some comments about Brady had some comments about some of the mediocrity in the game. And I just want to say Dak is not who he was talking about.
Okay.
For a number of reasons. But I just love that he's really playing the position. What I mean by that is I'm watching him make Ringo calls. So that's protection adjustments against these crazy looks and picking things up. I'm watching him, bring the tight end back in against zero pressure and throw an old concept we used to run for a touchdown to CeeDee Lamb in the back end zone. I'm watching him use his cadence beautifully and get into this rhythmic, here we go, into like dummy, using it as a dummy sometimes, doing it twice, into like other cadences. I mean, the last 4 or 5 weeks I've gotten to see more of their games, and I just want to say, like, he's playing a position in a really impressive way. And for whatever reason, maybe because he's the Cowboys quarterback and it's one of those premier positions in sports, like I feel like the Green Bay quarterback has been for a long time, and some other positions in various sports, he might take a little more shit than he deserves, or maybe it's deserving of the position, I guess. But I love the way he's playing, and I love the way he's playing, like really playing. I'm not talking about just like, making good throws. I'm talking about like, it seems more rare that guys are actually really playing a position where you're making adjustments, you're handling everything line of scrimmage. Now you're doing this crazy cadence stuff. Like, I love it, and I just want to shout out Dak for like really impressing me. Multiple times.
Hey, man, Dak, he doesn't hear that a lot.
No, he doesn't.
Doesn't get to hear that a lot. Way to go, Dak. Here we go.
Apologies to those who listen in the car with children, because Aaron Rodgers doesn't recognize that this is a family show, as David Smith noted in the chat. Speaking of David Howman, I just realized that your background kind of looks like it's your hands, like when your arms are down. I don't know if Tony or Danny agree, but it kind of looks like oversized hands.
I have a question. That's what I thought he was.
It's a strange optical illusion. You and I think defend Mike McCarthy more than anybody, and I think we probably hate Aaron Rodgers more than anybody. So your thoughts on what Aaron had to say on Pat McAfee's show on Tuesday?
Yeah, when I first saw the tweet come up where it's like Aaron Rodgers talking about Dak Prescott, like my instinct, like almost like a muscle reflex, was like, keep my quarterback's name out of your mouth. And then I listened, I was like, oh, like, go on, keep talking. It really was like, that meme of like heartbreaking, the worst person just made a really good point.
I saw you tweet that out. That was really funny. Yeah.
And like that was like my initial reaction, was like, he's saying good things about Dak, and like the things he's saying are also very true. And it's especially poignant because it comes from a guy who spent the first 13 years of his career in this same offense with Mike McCarthy. And of course, there's all the debate about like, Mike McCarthy, was he carried by Aaron Rodgers? Well, Aaron Rodgers hasn't really done a whole lot as far as postseason success since McCarthy left Green Bay. He hasn't gotten to the Super Bowl yet, and even though McCarthy was the one holding him back, all that, yada, yada, yada. But for him to be talking about another quarterback that plays in that same offense with Mike McCarthy at his first year calling the plays again, and just telling him, talking about like he's calling these kind of protections, he's running these same concepts that I've seen, and like he's doing it right, he's doing it the way he's supposed to. I think it really does mean just a little bit extra as opposed to just some other player saying that he's playing well, because this is a guy that very much knows what he's talking about on the ins and outs of the scheme. And, for all of us here in Cowboys land who have been saying like Dak's been playing great the last few weeks. And, of course, other people, they're not going to give him credit until he goes and beats the 49ers, beats the Eagles, whatever, wins a couple games in the playoffs. But for it to come from a guy like Aaron Rodgers, who generally has some capital built up, I think, just from a football perspective, because people recognize him as a really great player, it means a lot, and it's nice to hear that recognition.
I think that's well said. Also, I agree with Rudy that Aaron tried to put the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers in the same breath as the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys, which was okay. But Tony, a lot of people dismiss anything positive when it comes to Dak, right? It's up this season. It's haven't beaten a team above 500. He can't win the big games, like this, that, whatever. Now it's to Howman's point, like we can all think what we want about Aaron Rodgers, but nobody can deny his success as a football player, as a quarterback, as a cerebral player. But even the hatred for Dak from the people who spew it is so pronounced that they're like, oh, Aaron has no idea. Like Aaron has no clue what I'm watching with my own eyes. Dak is only beating these tomato cans. Aaron sucks.
Yeah, absolutely right with that. But I also think that this may be a turning of the tide. I think somebody of Aaron Rodgers' stature may have people, public perception, because, herd think, whatever it is, everybody thinking the same thing is pretty common. But I think if Aaron Rodgers shines light on the way that Dak Prescott plays, it might really change the way people view it, because it's one thing for me to come on the round table and to be screaming the praises and Howman, because people that really defend Dak Prescott, who have never stopped defending him, it brings more merit when you got a guy who's a future Hall of Famer to come on the show and speak about him in such a glaring manner. And he wasn't like prompt or promoted to. He just did it in such a casual way, and to really break down the nuance of like, okay, I'm an elite level quarterback. I played this game at a high level, and I respect the way that this guy is operating, not the way he's throwing the football, but the way he's controlling everything that comes into being a quarterback and high level he's playing. I mean, there are 32 starting quarterbacks in the NFL. He could have spoken about anybody, and he chose to stop and talk about Dak Prescott on the national stage. So I think if we sit here and Dak continues to play the way that we have seen him play, I think this could really be a turning point in the public perception. Now, there'll always be some naysayers, but like the absolute awful takes about Dak Prescott might slow down a little bit, start and move forward.
Danny, I agree with Tony. And in fact, Dak Prescott this time a week ago was, I believe, plus 3,000 to win MVP at DraftKings Sportsbook. That has since climbed and bounced around a bit from plus 850 to plus 1,000. But the national perception has caught up a bit to kind of what we've been saying and believing here. The Cowboys in their first 5 games at home this season have scored 205 points. Granted, some of that is Deron Bland and special teams. It's not all offense. But the last NFL team to score at least 205 points in their first 5 home games of a season was the 2014 Green Bay Packers, one of Aaron Rodgers' MVP seasons. Obviously, Mike McCarthy was the play caller there. We joke about how you're unwilling to give Mike McCarthy credit. It's amazing how Aaron spewed everything that he did and didn't offer a shred of credit to Mike McCarthy. It's all Dak is incredible. But
you noticed that?
Yeah, I mean, but this is something I say a lot to people is, the Cowboys have won more regular season games in the last 3 years than anybody except, I believe, the Chiefs and the Eagles. Obviously, Dak Prescott's the highest graded quarterback in the NFL. Their offense is the highest scoring offense in the NFL. Like we could sit here and for days go through all these things. And so it cannot be true that the head coach sucks and the quarterback sucks. Like something has to be amazing or elite. And if you think the head coach sucks, then the quarterback has to be incredibly elite. He literally has to be Aaron Rodgers. And if you think the quarterback stinks, then the head coach has to be elite. But somehow, some way, now we're reaching a point where we're giving Dak Prescott all of this credit. And I'm a happy person about that, but Mike's not getting a piece himself.
That's true. And I think what probably did it for a lot of people, I can't speak for everybody, but I can speak for myself. And I think what the biggest eye opener was the Chargers game, because honestly, that was Dak putting the offense on his shoulders and making plays with his legs when the plays weren't there. And I think from that point on, it just started. I don't know if something clicked for McCarthy. He's like, you know what? He's better than what I'm, how I'm treating him, because it just seems like every week thereafter, just Prescott became the quarterback that we once saw. And, all the things that Aaron Rodgers is saying, it's great that he says that. Aaron Rodgers is, he's a fantastic quarterback, no question. Used to be one of my favorite non-Cowboy players for sure, but I'm kind of sour on him since he broke up with, Olivia Munn and Danica Patrick and Shailene Woodley. I mean, clearly,
Shailene. I feel like it's Shailene. I really don't.
I don't even know what it is, no. But clearly his judgment is a little bit askew. So, but I will say what he said there. He's not saying anything that we didn't really already know. I mean, we're calling out protections and the way he communicates at the line. This is Dak Prescott. This is what he does. So, I mean, it's great that people are giving him credit, and Prescott is playing outstanding. The offense is putting up points. But I don't know that this is like a big surprise to us. We saw him do it in 2021, and we saw him do it before the calf injury, and we've seen this from him. We know he's capable of it. As far as McCarthy getting credit, I think honestly those guys, it just needs to. I kind of McCarthy's kind of like Simple Simon to me. He can really make things simple, easy, and do some things. But when you start to throw some things back at it, you need a little bit more complexity. Those are the times where I would prefer to have Kellen, because Kellen is more complex and everything. So things are going great against the Carolinas and the New York Giants and whatever. But I want to see how he does against the Niners defense and some of and that's the thing, is those things still need to be proved. And until that happens, it don't matter if McCarthy or Prescott, nobody is going to get the credit they deserve, because they have to win those games.
Howman, I think you're the only person, no offense, Tony, who's like willing to come with me on the Mike deserves a bag of, they can all get credit. Like we can give Dak his bag, we can give McCarthy his bag. This is a convenient week to have the conversation about Kellen Moore, because his offense had an opportunity against a very stout defense in the Baltimore Ravens on Sunday Night Football, and he floundered. We were all told by the national media that Kellen Moore with Justin Herbert was going to light up the NFL. And while I don't want to sit here and just hate all over the Chargers, right now, I mean, I don't think Mike McCarthy gets enough credit for making the executive decision to say, look, Kellen Moore, there's a lot of good here, but I think it can be better if it has to be different. And so far through week 12 of the season, Mike McCarthy is right.
Yeah, he's absolutely proven. I don't think he necessarily came out and said this, but the impression that we all got at the time was that he kind of had the feeling that he's the more experienced coach. I mean, he definitely is the more experienced coach, but as far as being a play caller, he's got a better feel for how to adjust on the fly when things get sticky, and that's been the case this year. On some level, I agree with the Simple Simon analogy and I had this thought, watching the Chargers this past week, was like, Kellen Moore has all the really cool flashy plays. Like he has a bunch of really cool stuff in his playbook. And then around all that, he's got like just stuff that's filler until he can get to the next cool play. He has the hook and lateral that he tried. He tried that so many times in Dallas, by the way, and it never worked. So I was happy to see it finally pay off in a game, one that everyone was watching. That must have been really cool for him until they lost. The difference with McCarthy is he doesn't necessarily have flashy plays, and except for those couple of times he broke out the Wildcat last week. And he smartly went away from that when it clearly did not work. But he doesn't have flashy plays. He just has plays that work, and they're all built off of each other. They all complement each other. He's more of an offensive coordinator. Kellen Moore is more of an offensive play caller, and I think that's kind of where they were at. Where Moore, he's still very young. He's a very bright mind. No one can deny that. But he's still kind of figuring out what the offensive coordinator role actually entails. And McCarthy has been there. He's grown. He's developed. He's changed. He's evolved. And right now, him and Dak Prescott, I mean, Prescott said it after the game, like, this is the most comfortable he's been in an offense, in a very long time. And he's obviously playing great. Him and McCarthy really just at this point have a good feel for each other. I think the first few weeks they were kind of, getting in sync a little bit, as to be expected. But right now they've both hit their stride. They both deserve their credit. Obviously the quarterback's the one who makes the plays, but McCarthy is putting it in his hand. They have one of the highest early down pass rates. He's saying, Dak, you're playing on fire. Go out there, do your thing. And that's something that deserves recognition as well.
Tony, I wanted to talk about the narrative shifting on Dak from a national perspective, but I had to go to bat for Mike. So I had to take a detour for a moment. I forget what it was, but you shared something on your Instagram story today about Dak, and you said, don't let the star fool you. He's obviously playing well. And I think what Aaron said is fair about how maybe it is fair for not Dak, but for whoever, holds this position to take a little bit more heat because of the position. There are obvious pros that come with being the quarterback of the Dallas Cowboys. And so you can argue that a little bit more grief or hyperbolic analysis is fair. But it does seem like, to Danny's point, a lot of people are seeing what we've been seeing for a long time, like whether it's Aaron Rodgers or Nick Wright or a lot of people who have been pro Dak Prescott, for the course of the last 6 weeks. They're like, yeah, this dude's really good. And it feels like we're all here like, yeah, we know, like we've seen this before. So some people are finally having the wool taken off of their eyes.
Yeah, it's a culmination of things, right? Like when you talked about Mike McCarthy taking over for Kellen Moore, the number one thing they spoke about was how it became so quarterback friendly. And then you have a guy who's objectively a really good quarterback already, and you put him in a system that is curtailed to what he does well and what the quarterback position is supposed to look like in this scheme, and he goes out there and he perfects it. Then you got a guy who's playing at an elite level, statistically looks to be the best quarterback in football, right now since week 6. Like, nobody's playing the position better than Dak Prescott. So I think at one point in time with that, if you add the fact that the negativity almost got to like a fever pitch, whereas like it stopped making sense, right? Like the negativity around Dak Prescott reached a climax where people were like, wait a minute, we actually have national media guys saying like, this is a little too much. Like, we got to pump the brakes a little bit. So I think when that hysteria came back down to earth, mixed with the fact that he's played out of his mind for a month plus now, it became unavoidable. So now it became, can you still hold credibility and still talk bad about this guy? And it just wasn't possible. So yes, there is still room for, how it is with the Cowboys quarterback and the Cowboys. If they beat Seattle Thursday, they're going to talk down the legitimacy of Seattle. If they lose, then it's the same Cowboys. So at the end of the day, all you can do is just go handle business. And if your quarterback continues to play the way he does, you'll take care of the rest of it as it comes.
We're about to talk about the Seattle game, but I like this comment from Zachary, who says, I think Mike deserves credit for listening to his players. I seen on Sounds of the Silent where Cooks had asked Mike McCarthy to put that play he scored under the scheme for the week, and he did it. And Howman, before we get to Seattle, a lot of people mentioned this, right? A lot of people are like, oh, well, the Cowboys offense didn't really like take off this season until Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb offered some points of constructive criticism of Mike McCarthy. And people act like this makes Mike McCarthy some like fraud or loser. It's like, what a horrible quality in the offensive play caller that he took feedback from the most talented players on the team and then listened and implemented it moving forward. Like what a loser for not having a plan in July that he has stuck to permanently that has worked flawlessly.
Yeah, the first thing that just pops into my head was a couple years ago with Kyle Shanahan and the 49ers, Brandon Ayuk coming in, and like there was this story about how like he was suddenly in the doghouse, like he wasn't getting reps in games, they weren't throwing to him, and it came out that like Ayuk had approached Shanahan and said like, hey, I want to be a bigger part of the offense, and he was kind of like, no, you got to earn your spot. Like who do you think you are? I'm not even going to play you now because of that. And he had to like re-earn his reps. And then once he gets in the game, guess what happens? He makes big plays. He's, now people are talking about he might actually be better than Deebo Samuel. He's been a very, very good receiver this year. And it's like the complete opposite with Mike McCarthy, where like players come to him and say, hey, I think like things would be better if I had a bigger role. And he says, yeah, let's take a look at that. And then with CeeDee Lamb, they started feeding him more. He absolutely produced. And that opens things up for Brandon Cooks, who wants more. And so then they give it to Brandon Cooks. And, even Jalen Brooks, who's been mostly doing work on special teams. McCarthy mentioned a couple of weeks ago, like Brooks has been doing great on special teams. So they started giving him some more snaps on offense. He hasn't had like, absolutely dominated the game, but he's produced when they've thrown his way. So he's, he's a coach that's willing to take that input. And especially because that was one of the kind of criticisms levied at him at the end of his tenure in Green Bay. It's nice to see, one, that he listens to his players because the players like that. And two, that he's willing to evolve and change his approach. Like that should be a good thing that you want in a coach.
Interesting how it isn't. That's the way things roll sometimes. All right. An update on the score as we have a little bit of the show left to go. Tony, you're at 118. Howman, you are in the lead at 122. Danny, you're the caboose right now at 110. How's it feel?
It feels fine. And I wanted to add one more thing. I'm not done with this McCarthy thing. So I first off, I do agree that one of my favorite things about him is that he does evolve and he does listen, and certainly the adjustments he's made has been fantastic. But I kind of feel like you guys, I know maybe not Tony, but you guys remember the Office episode, the Willy Wonka episode. I feel like it's kind of like things were going great. The Cowboys offense was just killing it. Everyone's happy. McCarthy's like, yeah, it's my idea. And then when things aren't going so well, it's like Kellen Moore got all the blame. And but then you look at things and he goes in there in the beginning of the season. You guys talked about deserving credit. If we all can agree that Dak Prescott was never the problem, then who was the problem when things were when things were terrible early? And I kind of feel like when his idea of running the ball, we're going to run the ball, we're going to we're a defensive team. When they realized that was just a bad idea, what does he do? He shifts it again, and now they're doing the things that they were doing before. They were throwing the ball. So it's just, to me, it's kind of like, yeah, it's great, but I feel like I've seen this movie before, and Mike McCarthy wasn't the star of it. So I don't care who's doing it as long as the Cowboys offense continue to have the success. I know that Dak Prescott is a good quarterback, so there's nothing need to be revealed there. McCarthy is the one that still has to prove things to me. So it's great now, but will it be great when it matters against tough teams?
Howman, you raised your hand.
Well, I mean, I think it's funny to say that the offense was terrible those first few weeks. Obviously, it wasn't as great as it has been, but they were still, by efficiency metrics, they were a top 12 team. They were not at the level that they're at right now, but they were moving the ball. They had trouble scoring in the red zone. They've since fixed those red zone issues. Nobody seems to talk about the red zone anymore, but they've got one of the best red zone offenses in the NFL the last few weeks. And also about like running the ball, like, yeah, they had a lot of rushing attempts. They were crushing most of those games. Their early down pass rate, which filters out those garbage time plays, they were still in the top 10 in early down pass rate. Like they were throwing it when they were actually in the game and trying to score and trying to move the ball a lot. And, they've significantly upped it since then, but he still wasn't, this run heavy, run first kind of guy, established the run that people made him out to be when he had that soundbite that got taken way out of context. So like, sorry about the giant hands. I can't help it. But I mean, the offense was not as good as it was now, but that's because they're playing at a supernova level and they were playing just good, which is still, just good is good. So I don't think that it's an overreaction to say that they were just terrible. Like, they were still playing well. They were moving the ball and they were still putting the ball in Dak Prescott's hands, just not as much as they are now.
My point isn't as profound or as significant as Howman's, but to give Mike McCarthy a slight benefit, which again is not a popular thing to do. I mean, everybody remembers that he obviously didn't coach in 2019, took the year off and built his barn and his PFF mansion or whatever.
He was watching Cowboys games.
Right. Well, so he got fired before the 2018 season ended. So, I mean, we're talking about it had been over 4 years since he'd called plays. I mean, because obviously Kellen Moore had done it. And I think, what I give McCarthy a lot of credit for is building a team, building a culture. I think you would agree with this, Danny, that is a consistent playoff team. And so he, I'm not saying the Cowboys treated the first, 5 weeks of the season like a glorified preseason, but I mean, again, I think the Cowboys were figuring out who they were going to be. They didn't come out, this smooth and this fluid because it took some time to kind of figure things out, figure out how Brandon Cooks worked in the offense, figure out what Tony Pollard was like. And I would also offer the first 5 weeks of the season, they were down an offensive lineman or two every week. So, I mean, there was some shifting happening all over the place and it took some stabilization to see the final product.
Very possible. And I'm hoping that what you're saying is actually why things are so different. But I feel like I didn't think he came out with a very good plan. And I think that you need to approach these games I know he's playing the long game here, and that's great. But if you're 8-3 and you're looking at the 5 seed, I mean there's not a lot of margin to there's no reason the Arizona game should have happened. There's things that happened early in the season I just don't have a lot of tolerance for it, I guess. Now, is he redeeming himself? He is. I mean, what's happening, and Howman knows this too, is the offense looks way better, and you got to credit him for doing the things feeding CD so much. That guy is just working him a lot. They're not forcing the run he said he was going to do, and they're finding other ways to kind of get those short stuff. I'm pleased with everything that they're doing. I just want to. At the same time, with the talent they have, this is what I expect. I'm not he's not over surprising me and overperforming. To me, this is what I expect from him. Maybe I have high expectations because I do believe in the roster building of this team. I do believe in Dan Quinn. I believe in all these other things and the talent of Brandon Cooks and CeeDee Lamb. And maybe that's just my expectations are too high, but he's just doing what I expect him to do. Finally.
Tony, before we move on, I promise we're getting to the Seattle game. Thank you, Brian, for the super chat. Says, for anyone who has had a job with a normal manager, most managers don't listen to their players because they are afraid they will get the credit instead of the manager. It's good to see a manager listen to the trenches. And Tony, Mike McCarthy's been through an incredibly humbling process, obviously getting fired, not just in general, but as a Super Bowl winning head coach from one of the NFL's Tiffany brand franchises, and then losing a very public PR battle to Aaron Rodgers, the big Bleacher Report story and the massages and all that stuff. And he isn't somebody who is seemingly starving for credit. He is seemingly always willing to kind of allow whoever it is to thrive and shine instead of him. I mean, a lot of people, would be threatened by what Dan Quinn offers in terms of public perception, but Mike McCarthy doesn't seem to be.
Yeah, and to that point, I believe it was Dan Quinn who came to Mike McCarthy at one point and was like, "Do you want me to take a job? Is this becoming too loud a noise for the two of us here, and am I a distraction?" So I think you're absolutely right. I think understanding what the bigger picture is, and you get a little longer in the tooth, and what your motivations early on may not exactly be your motivation now, where I think he's appreciative of the situation he's in. He's the head coach of the Dallas Cowboys, which speaks volumes to a resume booster if nothing else. And then you look at the fact that he's been successful 12-5 seasons, well on their way to do it possibly again, third year in a row. And from the Jason Garrett days, we always talked about playoffs back-to-back season were not guaranteed. It almost felt like you were hoping to get back after you lose or get 8 wins. So just the consistency, even though it hasn't reached a pinnacle and hasn't gotten over the hump here, you feel good about what he's doing. I think some of that comes from learning in the humility he's moving with now.
All right, so let's get to the Seahawks game as we take a look at the Cowboys schedule. So begins the opportunity to prove that they are somebody who can beat teams that are above 500. Tony, by the way, the conversation on Friday morning, if the Cowboys beat the currently 6-5 Seahawks, will be about how they did not beat the team above 500, despite the fact that Seattle was above 500 when Dallas beat them. But these are the 5 remaining games for the Cowboys, as our visual audience can see. Seattle at home, Philadelphia at home, at Buffalo, at Miami, Detroit at home, Jimmy Johnson's Ring of Honor Day, and then at Washington to round it out in Week 18. In a game that might prove to be inconsequential as far as playoff seeding is concerned. I wrote about this week, Howman, at our site. I did a video as well. I've talked about this a lot, obviously, in the weeks leading up to this, about how this game against Seattle could have the potential to be the most significant one remaining on the schedule as far as playoff implications are concerned. I believe that to be the case, given the fact that Philadelphia has not lost any of the games from their own gauntlet. Philadelphia could lose on Sunday to San Francisco. They're favored to do so. They could lose next Sunday at AT&T Stadium. They are favored to do so. And when they get on the plane to head back to Philadelphia next Sunday night, they would still be in first place in the NFC East, even if Dallas beats Seattle on Thursday night. And their schedule, obviously, down the road is much friendlier than the Cowboys because of Buffalo, Miami, and Detroit. So that being said, David Howman, we'll start with you. True or false? Thursday is the biggest remaining game of the season for the Cowboys.
Well, I'm looking at my Coach Speak bingo, and it tells me that I'm close to a bingo if I say that the most important game of the year is the one that's up next on the schedule. So I have to give credit to that. But I do think, I don't know if I'm ready to go ahead and say true on this, that it is the biggest remaining game, just because I think they stand to gain a lot more, obviously, from beating the Eagles and at least splitting that series. They also stand to gain just in terms of, well, one, common opponents, but also just general experience and like proving that they can beat these teams if they play, and win against the Bills on the road, Miami with how good they've been this year, and then Detroit even after, blowing the game to the Packers on Thanksgiving. But I think those are really the ones where we're going to look and, if they lose one of those games, it doesn't really matter if they beat Seattle and Philly. Like, you need so much to go right just from the Eagles losing games for them to still have a chance at winning the division, but they also can't slip up. So those are really the challenges. I'm not saying Seattle's not a challenge. Like that's a team that can get frisky. They got to take them seriously. And I like their chances against Seattle, but I'm really looking at those other 3 games and as well as the Eagles game to where that's really going to determine, one, whether or not obviously they get the number 1 seed of the division win. But really, if they can beat those teams, especially on the road, that's going to tell you what they can actually do in the playoffs, even if they are a 5th seed and having to play every playoff game on the road.
Danny Phantom, Kevin says, realistically, it's time to admit we're playing for the 5 seed now. The New York Times playoff simulator has the Eagles with a 94% chance to win the NFC East. It would take something improbable, maybe them losing with Seattle themselves, maybe dropping one of those Giants games, maybe Kyler Murray propelling the Cardinals to beat them as well. Obviously, anything is possible. But I do think it's fair to suggest that this is the most likely path to the playoffs with the Cowboys. And that being said, they are currently the 5 seed. Seattle is currently the 6 seed. So Dallas cannot clinch a playoff berth on Thursday night with a win, but they can effectively clinch one. And they can pick up that head-to-head tiebreaker if that comes into play against Seattle specifically, because if the Cowboys are a wildcard team, we all want them to be the 5 seed so they can face the winner of the NFC South.
Yeah, I agree with everything. And I think that, you even know this more so. I pretty much thought they were the 5 seed prior to, this, I've kind of locked into this. For me, when we did not win the game in Philadelphia, I think basically everything things kind of sunk for me. That's a kick in the stomach that I have still not recovered for. So I'm kind of already in them. There's been some hope with games against Kansas City and Buffalo that it seemed like there was a chance, but with that now over and done with, it's over. We're looking at the 5. And not only are we looking at the 5, but you're right. We can deliver the blow and for all intents and purposes, just, lock down the 5. But I feel like that we're locking down anyway, because honestly, who's going to catch us? We're a couple games ahead of them. I feel like the Cowboys, unless they just go on some type of skid, we're not going to drop the 5. So really the Cowboys should just kind of keep going as much as they can. I do agree that that some of the bigger games against Philly, not just Philly, but Miami, we want to see them beat good teams, and even Buffalo, which I know people are kind of down on Buffalo right now and stuff. I think
they're losers who offer no help.
I know you especially are down on them, but I still, to me, that's a win, for the Cowboys. So I want to see them come away and beat those teams. Those are bigger. Seattle, come on. What's Seattle? What's Geno Smith? I mean, what should we really be that psyched about beating the Seahawks? No. So no, it's definitely not the biggest game by any means. But at the same time, I'm kind of already settled into the 5, and I'm looking at little paths that are like favorable, and there might be, and so there's still a silver lining for finishing maybe with the second best record in the NFL and having to play a road wild card game.
Tony, we've got 2 false answers. Do you want to go out on an island? I guess it wouldn't, because I think it is the biggest game. And to be clear, my point is from a implication standpoint. I get the narrative that you all are pushing about beating a team with a winning record. I think Miami fits that bill a little bit more. Because even if Dallas beats Philly, Tony, we know they can do that. Like, that wouldn't shock anybody. Like, Miami would be kind of a bit of a different measuring stick.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually going to be true and kind of ride with you here, because I think every game – you're going to say this, right? Like Howman said, it's coach speak. Every game is the most important game, but what we know about the Cowboys, whether it's real, legitimate, or too much stock in it, not enough stock in it, they're an emotional team, right? So I think they understand what the narrative is, and you can hear Micah Parsons talking about it on his show one day, I'm sure, where they say, okay, they haven't beaten a team with a 500 record. They can go ahead and shut that up on Thursday night, right? Whatever you think about Seattle, the facts are the facts, is they have a winning record. So if you can go ahead and handle that, that's one thing off the list. You can see J-Ron Curse tweeting about it, saying like, oh, what now? Like, what are you guys going to say about us? Okay, we beat a winning team.
Actually, they would be 500 if we beat them.
That would be the conversation on Friday morning. Like, you've just signed, like, that's the programming for every national talk show on Friday morning.
But when they step on the field Thursday, they'll have a winning record. So, and then you put them in that 500. So I can't even really understand that point of view. But my point is, you win that game, you handle it, then they're an emotional unit, right? We've seen that, they get too hyped up and they get steamrolled by the 49ers. It almost looked like the moment was too big for them, and that's concerning. But in the same sense, if they go ahead and handle this and say, okay, you guys can't say that about us anymore, and then they host Philadelphia and say, we were 6 yards away from beating a team that's 10-1 and possibly 11-1 by the time, we see them again. We can beat this team, and then they go ahead and they find an emotional reason to beat Philadelphia, and then you keep it moving. And the reality of the situation is they're going to have to take every single game with that type of feeling, because this schedule is tough. Like, I know that everyone's down on the Buffalo Bills, but I have a huge amount of respect for the talent they have. Josh Allen. I know Miami can, light the scoreboard up. Detroit is Howman's second favorite team. So there's really a good amount of, like, this is a scary stretch here. And if things spiral out, it could go ugly. And I'm not saying it could go like real bad, but there's a chance that things may change completely about how we feel about this team going forward.
Okay, so Tony agrees with me. So in that sense, he's the most right here. You all have inspired one final question that wasn't on our initial rundown. We're going to get to it anyway because we have a little bit of extra time. So that being said, we were all really bummed when the Bills lost in Philadelphia. We were all really bummed when Kansas City lost to the Eagles last week on Monday Night Football. It has been extremely annoying. So that being said, we'll start with you, Danny Phantom. How confident will you allow yourself to feel if Dallas wins on Thursday and Philadelphia loses to San Francisco on Sunday? You can contextualize this however you want, with a number, with a word. Floor is yours.
No, not at all. I mean, I expect
that wouldn't improve your confidence at all.
No, I expect that to happen. To me, San Francisco is the best team in the league, and Philadelphia doesn't scare me. I think that they're comparable. They're a good team. I give them the credit. I'm more worried about San Francisco myself. I expect the Niners to beat them. I will be shocked if they don't, to be honest. And so, I mean, where am I going to be if that happens? In the same spot, trying to help cope, realizing we're going to be in the 5 spot. Because that's what's going to happen. So, I mean, it'd be a different story if the Eagles would lose a game to where.
We're talking about them losing again. That's literally what we're talking about happening.
Okay. Lose another game. I mean, this I've already counted on this loss. I'm counting on this loss, and I count on the Cowboys beating them. That if those two things happen, we still don't control our own fate. So I mean, we need help. I mean, it might be the Giants that have to help us to have any chance at winning division. I mean, if I'm being serious when I say that, that's really the best path for the Cowboys now. So, will I feel more confident? No, I think that's exactly how it's going to go, and I will feel no different.
Tony Catalina.
Yeah, for me, I don't think I would change either, to be honest with you, because I said it last week, and I got to stay consistent, like I'm far less worried about what the Eagles are doing. I'm going to sit here and I'm going to root against them every single week, but like I'm more worried about what's on our plate and handling the business we got to handle, because it would be classic Cowboys to lose Thursday and then watch the Eagles lose to the 49ers and make up no ground, and it does us no good. So if you don't handle business on Thursday night, what the Eagles do doesn't matter. And I will sit here and say, obviously, it's frustrating they lost to the Bills. And I mean, they beat the Bills and they beat Kansas City. And every week I'm going to root against them, but every week they find a way to win, and that's tough.
Howman, I'm not going to ask you this question. I'm going to flip it around just a little bit. Kevin says, so if we're conceding that we're playing for the 5 seed, are we then rooting for Philly to take the 1 seed? If, say, Detroit would rather go to Philly than San Francisco. In that respect, maybe you would want to see Philadelphia win on Sunday, Howman.
Well, I think this week is like kind of a zero-sum proposition for Cowboys fans, because you're either rooting for the Eagles to win or you're rooting for the 49ers to win, and neither of those feels really good. Like I feel gross about the fact that I'm going to be rooting for the 49ers in that game. And you know, with all the history that these two teams have, like I don't want to be in that position. So it is a tough spot. You know, I'll still be rooting for the Eagles to lose, just because I want to win the division. I want home field, especially because of how good the Cowboys have been at home, you know, these last couple of years. Like I think that fact alone, you know, being able to play at home throughout the playoffs just dramatically increases their odds of making it all the way to the Super Bowl. So I'm still going to hold out hope until that's mathematically eliminated. As far as like, would you rather go to Philly or San Francisco? I mean, I think if your goal is to get to the Super Bowl, you're probably going to have to go both of those places. Or to me, it really doesn't matter which order, whether you have to go to Philadelphia and win and then go to San Francisco and win, or, you know, vice versa. I mean, either way, you gotta go on the road and you gotta win a game. So I'm not really considering that possibility. I'm just hoping that things break their way. You know, lose to the 49ers, lose to the Cowboys. And then, you know, I mean, they play the Giants, who have won 2 games. Tommy DeVito's starting to look a little confident. Wouldn't it be like peak NFL chaos for Tommy DeVito to take them down? Or the Kyler Murray and the Cardinals? Like, the Cardinals are a better team than they were.
Jonathan Gannon to ruin the 1 seed.
Jonathan Gannon to ruin, once again, 2 years in a row, ruin the Eagles' chances. That would be so poetic. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just saying it could happen, and it would be peak NFL chaos if it happened that way.
Okay. This was a good, fun discussion. I think you all performed very well. Watsamata, I saw you join the chat, saw your notifications, didn't let you know that we were flying when we were. If only we flew at the same time every week. You know what I mean? That would, you know, that would maybe help you out, Watsamata. But Watsamata, you missed out. It was a double points night, and the points have been calculated. I've been doing a lot of mental math. So shout out to me. Danny, who do you think won?
I don't know, RJ. I really, it's kind of scary to think about you having to keep track of all this math.
You know, I won number sense in UIL when I was in middle school. So really? I mean, it's kind of my strong suit. Not trying to brag or anything. I mean, you know, I can tell you what, you sure as hell didn't win, Danny. Jeez. So that being said, the points are in. Tony Catalina with actually, you all broke a record. We had a record-setting night here. All 3 contestants north of 200 points. But Tony, you had the most at 218. Congratulations. How are you feeling, Tony? This is, as Jim Nantz said, this is history. This has never been done before, just like Deron Bland.
This is a powerful moment, man. Every time I win the round table, it's just a beautiful moment.
You notice Chris Halling went silent, Tony? Like, since you started to pick up all these points?
I knew he wasn't around when Howman threw the Jalen Brooks comment, and he didn't comment back. So that's what I knew he was gone.
Tony, the peripheral vision is on fire here. I mean, you're just seeing everything. You're feeling it. You are Dak Prescott at the line of scrimmage, completely and totally in control. Howman, a fantastic effort, but just shy. How's the silver medal feel?
You know, I was fishing for points from Chris with that Jalen Brooks comment. I think I don't want to blame anyone, but I'm thinking if he had given me some love for that would have pushed me over with how close this ended up being.
Tony Watsamata, who was here late, said, Tony, again, I see that I have missed nothing lately. The praise for Tony. Ethan, Danny wants to let you all know that you're all winners. So do you feel that way, Danny Fenton?
You know, I've already conceded that I'm going to take the wild card spot. So I'm fine with it. And honestly, after throwing down the deviled eggs last week, I think Tony deserves it for sure. So there was times today where I actually forgot Tony was here. But I do think that it's well deserved. So congrats, Tony.
David Smith noted that it was the giant hands that did you in, Howman. I wanted to get that comment read out loud for the audio-only audience. We timed this very well because I mentioned at the very beginning here that our Madden simulation this week was running in the background. It just ended. And let me say, as a proper tease, it was pretty thrilling. So let's just leave it at that. That will drop on Wednesday here on the Blogging the Boys YouTube channel. Tony, as we leave, you told us last week that you love The Grinch, the Jim Carrey version. I was inspired by the Christmas discussion, and I tweeted out a few days ago, what is a Christmas movie in your mind that is a non-conventional Christmas movie? It's like a movie that reminds you of Christmas. I've been asking people this left and right. I did it on the mixtape as well. So like, it can't be The Grinch. It can't be Home Alone. It can't be Jingle All the Way. But like, what puts you in a Christmas mood, Tony, Catalina? We'll go around the bend here one time.
I mean, I'm going to say the cliche answer everybody says is Die Hard, right?
It doesn't count.
Take his title away. Take his
Tony,
title away.
Jeez, man.
I mean, I got to think of another Home Improvement episode that I like.
Howman, please fix this, because that was Tony, you always make me regret having you in. Always.
I know. It's not good. I'm not a gracious winner.
I think I'll go. This is definitely unconventional. I'll go with The Shining because all the snow, kind of the remote. Jack Nicholson wears a lot of sweaters. Feels Christmassy.
Okay, so we've got the super original answer of Die Hard. We've got The Shining. Danny Phantom, I think you're going to have a solid answer here.
I'm going to disappoint you yet again, RJ, because honestly, to me, for like, I pick a movie that just kind of where I'm sitting there and kind of lazily just watching TV, and it just feels warm to me, just comfortable, familiar. So I mean, I think any type of Spielberg type of 80s type, whether it's E.T. or Goonies or something like that, or I would say Gremlins, but actually that does happen during.
That
Christmas
was a common
time.
answer. I got that answer a lot.
Oh, really?
On my tweet, yeah.
Yeah, well, I don't know what qualifies as not a Christmas movie, and I don't attempt to define those these days. But I just any kind of movie that's just kind of makes you feel warm and it kind of brings back that memories, when you were younger or something. So that's my answer. So
I think that's a really good answer because I would also offer that's on like FX or ABC Family, like in the background of the family get together, like on the TV. So that's a really good answer, Danny Fenton. Really good kind of category to like throw a blanket around. I'm actually going to say that Chris Halling did win tonight's roundtable because he stole my answer. When I tweeted this out, I had a movie in mind, and it was Spider-Man No Way Home, which, Tony, I'm sure you haven't seen. But the movie took place kind of around Christmas, and I don't want to spoil it for somebody who hasn't seen it, but I feel like at this point it would be safe. I'm going to try to avoid that. But like, there's a an incredibly nostalgic tie-in, and there's a scene at the very end that is incredibly Christmassy. So yeah, it kind of checks your boxes, Danny Phantom. A lot of the movies I was given either took place at Christmas or movies that people watched at Christmas. So I guess The Shining is kind of yours, Howman, in terms of being a personal one. I would also offer Back to the Future. I got that for Christmas when I was a kid, and I watched it forever.
Hey, Spielberg produced that.
Hey, I mean, he did. That same Christmas, I got Mr. Deeds. So maybe Mr. Deeds qualifies as a Christmas movie as well. Tony, as we leave, please give us your best Grinch voice.
Oh, man. All right.
It's only your favorite
one.
Yeah, you said it was your favorite. Like, so I mean, like, this should be easy.
You're a mean one.
No,
RJ.
That's not him. That's the narrator. What?
That's all I got for you. That's what came to my mind.